This is the review for the Iron Wolf. Originally designed in 2010, it was designed by Jordan Steelquist, also known as BZ Power Forum leader Shannara, where it was entered in the mock section of the Kanohi Journal Storyline Contest, number 3, Iron Wolf. This mock also had 3 official pieces of art that later accompanied it in the second half of the contest. First of which was drawn by Kanohi Journal reader Vastalord, and the other 2 by Kanohi Journal reader Toa Kinluki. Though in this video we're going to be focusing on the mock rather than the pieces of art. Before we get into the review, quick disclaimer. Any or all of these Canon models are open to inaccuracies. I try my best to build these as accurate to the source pictures as possible. If I find any instructions for these models, I will link them in the description below. So, without any further ado, on to the review. The Iron Wolf was created by the Great Beings by modifying creatures that lived on Spherus Magna, making them cyborg-like, mixing metal and organic tissues, sort of the opposite of the Matoran's biology. After the shattering, a Glatorian by the name of Searle would train the wolves and use them to help him survive in the White Quartz Mountains. The most prominent appearance of the Iron Wolf is in the story serial The Riddle of the Great Beings, where Tardok, Crotesius, and Kerbold would go on an expedition to find the Red Star. This led them into the White Quartz Mountains, where they would be stalked by a pack of Iron Wolves. After encountering Searle, he called off the wolves and the 3 Agori were able to continue on their journey. Before we really dive into the model, I've made a few minor changes to the model which you'll see prominently through the review. First of which being the white connectors that make up the tail. I switched them from the 1999 mold to the 2008 updated mold. This is more of a personal preference as I had these parts in my bin and didn't have any other uses for them. Plus here, they won't break. Now, the last few changes that I made, I'll explain why I made these changes later on in the video. So first, I extended the axle that is in the piston of the front leg. At the front paw, I added black studs with a hole in it at all the front claws. And lastly, I changed out the ball joint, added a longer axle with a stop, and 2 half bushings at the foot section of the back leg. So now, taking a look at the model, this thing is extremely detailed. Every inch of this model has either been detailed, filled in, or covered up. A lot of the pieces also complement each other, and they just look so good. There's also a lot of rounded pieces to give it a very organic look. Starting at the head, it is mainly comprised of Technic, with an Anika thigh cover at the top. The eyes and the ears are made of these horn claw pieces, and it's just so simple that it works. Moving down to the torso, this is where things really get interesting. The whole torso is connected to this rigid tube, which acts as the spine, running all the way down to the tail. The shoulder and stomach area is comprised of some Technic and Bionicle parts, such as these Golok call shields and this Metru shoulder cover, which holds the head. The legs are built very simply with some Technic lift arms and connectors, one of which is a 2009 fist. It's also armored up with some silver Nuva shoulder pads and Kalma armor. And the paws are made of these connectors, ball joints, and claw pieces. The mid-torso is mainly filled out with the silver shoulder pads, tubes, and Anika thigh covers in white. The back end uses these rounded Anika feet as hips, which complement the tubes that wrap around to the underside of the body. This leads to the tail, which is made of a bunch of connectors and some Technic parts at the end. There's also a tube on the inside of the connectors to fill in the gap. The back legs are made of multiple connectors from 2004 and 2008, which is also covered up by a bunch of silver pieces. Moving down to the foot, we have these forearm pieces from Pohatu Fantoka in silver, and a tube wrapping around it all, which makes up the majority of the foot, with added pieces to give the foot more depth. Alright, articulation wise, this model is alright in terms of articulation, so you get a ball joint at the head, which allows you to go over that far, both ways. You can go up that far, down that far. So you get some movement at the head, but not a crazy amount. On the underside here, you have a ball joint at this Gallock call shield, which allows you to accommodate for the shoulder and the head. So it's mainly to cover everything up on the inside here. You get a standard ball joint at the shoulder, which can go up that far, down that far. It can go out that far. So nothing you wouldn't want it to do. You get a hinged ball joint here just because of how it's built. And then you can go straight out, and you can go 90 degrees. As I said, I extended this axle to a 9 long axle. The original build used a 7 long axle. So basically what this allows me to do is it allows me to straighten out the leg, and then when I want to bend the leg, I can push in the axle and not have to worry about it disconnecting at this connector when I pull it, because it has a tendency to do that a lot. So yeah, of course it doesn't do it on camera, because, you know, why would it do it on camera? Anyway, you get no rotation here at the leg. It's all forward, backward movement. And then you have 3 ball joints here at each one of the claws. And so you get a little bit of movement side to side. You also get a rotation because of the claws. Without these studs, these claws have a tendency to fall out really easily just because there's not really enough plastic for the ball joint to hold the claw. Moving to the torso, you have 2 ball joints tucked on the inside of the torso, which allow you to get some movement side to side. It's not a crazy amount, and it doesn't really hold it, but it is there if you want it. Moving at the hip, you have a standard ball joint here, which can go all the way around. Sometimes the 2 silver pieces on the top of the leg have a tendency to run in with this Inika foot. Then you have a hinged ball joint at the knee, which allows you to straighten out that much, bend that much, and then you get a full rotation at the ankle. And then finally you have a hinge here because of the pin, so you can adjust the 2 outer claws. You can't adjust the large inner claw. So yeah, overall that's pretty good. And then the legs can do the full, just shy of the full splits, so nothing too crazy. And then finally at the tail, because of this 28 long tube here, you can move the tail. So you can move it side to side about that far before things really start to put pressure on each other. It doesn't really hold all that much, it's more spring loaded. So yeah, but you can get it to hold if you hold it there for a long time or heat up the tube. So yeah, but you do get that articulation. So overall, this model is fairly well articulated. It's nothing too crazy, but it is articulated, so you can pose it, but the best poses tend to be this static standing pose and a walking pose. Alright, the issues of this model. It has a lot of questionable connections. From the angle of the sides of the head, the Inika armor on top of the head, to the assembly that holds the Gallock call shields on, the positioning of the silver Kalma armor, the receiving ends of the pistons that are attached to the feet, the 2 connectors above the head and shoulders, the back feet. Oh, the back feet. Yeah, I'll come back to that. As I mentioned earlier, I added studs to the front claws. This is because without these pieces, the claws will most likely fall out of the ball joint as soon as you move the model in the slightest. Alright, the back feet. Again, I mentioned earlier that I made a change here. Here's why. When I was building this as a prototype, I used the forearm piece from my 08 Takanuva. This worked out fine. I was able to replicate the build in the photos. The issues arose when I tore apart the prototype. The inside of the forearm piece was full of stress marks, especially around the pinhole. See, the original build used a standard ball joint, but when put flush with the forearm piece, there isn't enough room for the ball joint to sit nicely, so it ends up being pushed outward, creating stress marks. I warn you, if you're going to build this, do not build it to the original photos. Extend the axle to a 5-long axle and add 2 half bushings. On a side note, doing this mod also makes the gear on the back of the foot less likely to fall off because there's more room for the gear to grip the axle. Alright, size-wise, this model is fairly large. It comes in at about 28 centimeters or 11 inches, and it's approximately 15 centimeters or 16 inches. So, size comparison-wise, zoom out. Here it is next to a Mata build, if I can find a new one. There we go. There's a Mata build. Here it is next to a Metro build. And finally, an Anika build. So, yeah, it's a fairly big model. So, yeah, looks good. For some in-story comparisons, here it is next to Tarduk, if he'll stand, there we go, and Crotesius. So, he dwarfs Agori. I love it. Here it is next to the other creatures of Baramagna, the Sandstalker. I have to back up some more. Gotta make some room. Sandstalker, the Spigot, and finally a Rocksteed. So, yeah. Overall, I like it. And finally, here it is next to a standard minifigure. Here it is next to the Tatarok. Move that back, that over. And finally, here it is with my previous It's Canon video, Kerbal. Oops. Kerbal does not want to stand. There we go. So yeah. Now, if you're going to build this model for yourself from scratch, some of the more noteworthy pieces that may be harder to find or more expensive are the 28 long tube that makes up the spine. This originally came with the Kodak and Godak set. The black and white pin axles. They are generally expensive, the white ones more so. The white Metru chest cover. This only appeared in one set, being Toa Nuju, and this one can be a real pain to find. The silver Rakshi heads. These came with Rudaka. The silver forearm pieces. These are 2 of the largest pieces you'll need for this model. They came with the Caxium V3 set. The white axle connectors, I found they're generally harder to find in larger quantities. The large white gears, the small white gears, the white perpendicular connectors, which only appeared with Kreka, the white ball joint connectors, which are the 2004 mold. These only appeared with Prydak in this color. The white ball joint connectors in the 2008 mold, which only came in the 2008 Takanuva set in this color. And finally, the length 15 ribbed hose. Ribbed hoses generally get harder to find and are more expensive as they get longer. And that's the Iron Wolf, a very interesting model. Do I recommend it? No, not really. It lacks any real playability or posability, but it looks just so good. The Iron Wolf is a display piece through and through. Though, be warned, if you're gonna build this is a very frustrating build with many tight tolerances, especially those back feet. Mod those back feet. But, getting past all that, the end result is absolutely worth it. So, that's everything I have to say. Thank you for joining me down this road to the Iron Wolf. And thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date with all my latest videos. And with that, I will see you all next time.